Welcome to the BetterWallet podcast, a podcast where we talk to everyday people who have changed their lives through managing their money. We talk about their money journeys, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Welcome to the next episode of the BetterWallet podcast. As you guys know, the BetterWallet podcast is all about demystifying the topic of money and sharing powerful money stories from people who truly beat the odds. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of paying off your debt, and more specifically, 3 ways that debt freedom has truly changed my life. Okay, I think a lot of times as people are going through their financial journey, it might seem like it might not be all too worth it. Or you might say, well, I'm just going to live the rest of my life with debt. And in this episode, I want to walk you through all the ways that debt freedom has changed my life, and then how I'm applying the money that used to go to debt to make my future better in order to make my present better, right? What am I doing today? And then also to, help what I might have screwed up when I was paying off debt. So the past, right? So how am I helping myself in the future? How am I helping myself in the present? And then how am I, kind of recovering from the past, right? So let's go ahead and jump into it. And first, let me talk to you a little bit about my debt-free journey, because my debt-free journey is the reason why I'm here today talking to you guys. My debt-free journey was not easy, right? Like my first job out of school was at Vanguard. You guys know that. And as I was a financial advisor and selling my career as a financial advisor, I found myself living paycheck to paycheck, which was fairly ironic, right? Because I was helping people manage their money. I was helping them invest within, the Vanguard ETFs and mutual funds, but my money at home was not doing so well, right? Living paycheck to paycheck. And when I completed my first real budget, I found that I had about $1,500 to $1,500 going towards just debt, right? So not only credit card debt, but also student loan debt, as well as auto debt. So after, completing my first budget, which there's a difference between like a real budget and a fake budget, right? A real budget is what I have in my financial bulletproof checklist. So if you don't have that, go to my checklist. There's a template in there if you need it. But once I completed my first real budget, that's how I figured out, okay, well, I have a lot of money going towards debt. And I also have a lot of money going towards things that aren't really that important to my goals. So over time, I developed a plan in order to become debt-free by 2020. But during that time, there were days, there were weeks, months, quarters that were just extremely challenging where I wanted to give up. I wanted to give up on my debt-free journey. I wanted to stop, right? I had friends that were going on different vacations. They were spending money on things like shoes, clothes, right? They were going on these, trips to the different islands, whatever. And I had to have the hard conversation with them saying that, hey, I'm going to be sacrificing in the short term in order to benefit over the long term. See, there are times where you have to make those short-term sacrifices in order to have that long-term generational wealth or those long-term goals that you want to achieve, right? And I think a lot of times people don't want to sacrifice for those 3 months or even 3 years in order to have 30, 40, 50 years of prosperity for not only you, but for your family. So during that time, that was when I truly locked in. But the promise that I told myself was, as soon as I become debt-free, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to do with my money. Let it be investing, going on trips, right? Paying for things that I might not need at that moment, like clothes or shoes or whatever. I'm going to give myself the freedom to have fun with that money. But right now, the short-term sacrifice is that I'm going to put the money towards debt, and I'm going to be debt-free by 2020. That was my whole goal. Of course, I didn't know COVID was going to happen in 2020, but that was my goal from 2015-ish. So what I did was I put that goal on a whiteboard in my room. So every time I woke up, I saw, number one, a picture of my dad. And then number two, I had a picture or the whiteboard with all of my financial goals. So not only was I working on building my emergency fund, putting money away for my retirement, but I also had debt-free 2020. So those are my 3 financial goals. So once I became debt-free in 2020, July of 2020, I told myself that, hey, I'm going to do all the things I told myself that I was going to do. So let's kind of talk about what I've done over the last 3 years to improve my future, present, and past self. So as I mentioned, it's been about 3 years. So next week, I'm going to be celebrating my I guess when this recording comes out, I'll be celebrating my 3 year debt free anniversary. And I can't even believe that I'm saying that because, again, like I didn't make all too much money in my corporate career. And because I didn't make too much money and I was able to control how much money I was spending, that allowed me to become debt free. But I thought I was going to be in debt up to my eyeballs forever. So some of the things I'm doing in order to help my future self. So number one, I'm investing for the future, right? So I'm able to invest more and also build my business because I became debt free. What do you mean by that? So that $1,500 that I had that no longer goes to debt, I'm now able to invest that, right? And you might be thinking, okay, that's not all too much, or you might say, oh, that's a lot. Whatever you think, that's $250,000 after 10 years if you're investing in index funds, right? So $250,000 I'm able to have in 10 years because that $1,500 is no longer going to the man, right? It's going to things that are important to me for the future. So I have $250,000 after 10 years, and I'm sure it's probably going to be north of 600, 700,000 after 20 years because of compound interest. The other cool thing about being debt free and truly how becoming debt free has changed my life is that after 2020, because that money was no longer going to debt, I was able to apply that money to my business, right? BetterWallet. And in more ways than one, right? So I'm able to market better. I'm able to help my clients more because I'm able to reinvest that money into the business, right? And the other cool thing is I no longer need to have another $1,500 in order to afford my lifestyle every single month. What do I mean by that? So when you start a business, besides taxes, your biggest expense is going to be yourself. Again, besides taxes, your biggest expense is going to be yourself when you're starting a business. So if you want to then do your job full time, right? You want to do your business full time, you have to figure out what that hurdle is. A lot of people don't know what that hurdle is because they don't know how much money they spend on a monthly basis, but I did, right? So I was able to subtract $1,500 off of that every single month. That makes it way easier to be able to quit my job, right? So if I need $5,000 per month in order to survive, and now that number is 3,500, I no longer have to work as hard in order to make that money, generate that money in order for me to live, right? So I think a lot of people miss that when they want to leave their 9 to 5. They just think they need to make money, right? You need to make money in order to take care of your lifestyle and all your operating expenses for your business. And if you're debt free, that becomes significantly easier to do so, right? So paying off, $15,000 or $1,500 in debt made that extremely easy. Another way that I'm able to use that money is I'm basically buying days where I don't have to work again, right? So a lot of you guys know I'm on this fire journey of, putting money away, never have to work again in my life, right? So be able to put that money away and put it into a taxable brokerage account. I can retire, 40, 45 years old if I really wanted to, because I have that money put away and I'm going to be able to live off my investments. I mean, that's the goal. I don't think I'm going to actually formally retire, but I could if I really wanted to, if I really put my brain onto it. So the other way that I'm going about changing my life, because now, I'm debt free, or, how debt freedom has really changed my life, is focusing on the present, right? So it's great to go and invest your money, put money into a business, right? Work really hard. But at a certain point, and this is something I had to realize over time, at a certain point, you have to treat your personal self, right? So I would never forget back in 2017, that was probably like the hardest year for me because I was, moving jobs, right? That's when I quit Vanguard. I went into another job that frankly I didn't like as much. I told myself that, Mark, if you become debt free, I'm going to allow you, your future self, to travel 4 times a year to make up for the time that you were not allowed to travel. I told myself I wasn't allowed to travel, right? So now that I'm debt free, I can basically travel wherever I want, right? Again, like $1,500 goes pretty far. You pay for a decent flight, and you have maybe $1,000 in order to pay for lodging and food and all that stuff. So over the time that I become debt free, there's been 2020 doesn't count because we weren't able to go anywhere. Frankly, 2021 wasn't all too helpful either. So 2022 is when I really started to travel a little bit more. And now 2023, I'm trying to really stick to the quarterly travel schedule. So how debt freedom has changed my life is because I would been able to travel to places like Mexico, Turks and Caicos. I mean, domestically, all over the place, right? I have enough money to go about doing that. And when I was paying off debt, I definitely didn't have the ability to go about doing that. But that was me making up for the promise that I gave to myself years ago. And now I'm able to check out different regions, different parts of the world, because I have the financial freedom to be able to do so. Right. And then that brings me to the third and final way that debt freedom has truly changed my life. And that has to do with me taking care of what happened in the past. Right. So, what do I mean by that? So, when you're paying off debt and you're like hell bent on getting it done, you start to skimp in areas that might be extremely important, but not as important to you in the moment. What do I mean by that? So one thing that I definitely that definitely fell by the wayside when I was paying off debt was my overall fitness goals, right? I was still going to the gym, but I wasn't eating as healthy as I probably could have, right? So I would be going to Walmart or even Target in order to buy food because I knew it was going to be cheaper. Trying to think of some of the other ones. There are a few others in Philly where the quality of food just isn't that great. I mean, everyone knows Walmart, beef that might cost, I don't know, like $4 or $5 a pound. It's not as great as like going to places like Whole Foods or Trader Joe's, right? So one thing that I'm doing now is that now I can afford to go and eat or have food or buy food or groceries from Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and things like that to make up for all the bad food I might have eaten back when I was paying off debt. And not only was I going to the Walmarts and buying food, I was also going and just eating Indian food because I knew that food not only made me extremely happy. I love Indian food, but also it was cheap. It was maybe $7 to $10 at the time in order to pay for some biryani, right? So now that I'm debt free, I'm able to take care of myself a little bit more as it relates to my fitness and my health. In addition to that, I'm also able to get better workouts. So when I became debt free and gyms started to open up, I started going to some of the more expensive gyms, not because I wanted to be fancy or anything like that. It's because they have better equipment. They have better wellness and health programs at those specific gyms. In addition, you guys know I'm a big fan of Barry's Boot Camp. I've also started going to Barry's and paying, I think I pay like $250 a month just to attend their classes. And I take classes maybe like 2 times a week, 2 or 3 times a week. Right. So those are some of the ways that I was able to take care of my past self now that I'm become 100% debt free. And fitness and health, traveling more, and quitting my 9 to 5 and operating a BetterWallet full time and investing more. Those are all the ways that I was able to change my life now that I became debt free. Another place that I travel, I totally forgot about it, but next week I'm going to Bali. Right, like I looked at how much we already paid so far. I'm paying close to $4,000 to go to Bali, have a great time with one of my buddies, and it's my way of celebrating my 3-year debt-free anniversary. But there was no way I was going to be able to do that if I had as much debt as I did back in 2017, 2018. So again, if you're at a point where you're like, hey, I need to pay off this debt, but it's going to be challenging. I see my friends going out to doing this, doing that. I want you to dedicate yourself to your goals. Make those short-term sacrifices, right? Make those short-term sacrifices because I promise you, the best decision I ever made in my life was choosing to be debt-free. choosing. And I use that word specifically because I think a lot of times people aren't mentally focused on becoming debt free, and then they prolong it forever and they don't actually pay off debt until 30 years down the road. I chose to become debt free and I dedicated my life to it. I dedicated my money to it. And, I even, there's some friends that I might have lost because they wanted to do things that had nothing to do with my specific goals. And frankly, they couldn't understand that I wanted to be debt free by 2020. Right. So there's a lot of sacrifice that you have to have when you are working towards such a big goal like this. But if you are at a point where like, I'm sick of this, I just want to be done, I want you to focus on when you become debt free. When you become debt free, what are you going to do for yourself, right? How are you going to reward yourself for becoming debt free? It might be travel, it might be going out to eat, might be taking your families on vacation, whatever it might be, right? Figure out what that is. That's going to be the carrot at the end of the stick for you. Then I want you to work on those goals month by month. And not every day is going to be great. Every week might not be great. You might have months where it might not be great. But I want you to focus on being 1% better every single day and try to do things that might increase your income or decrease your expenses, right? For me, I use the word vendetta. I had a vendetta against every one of my expenses when I was paying off debt, every single one. And I looked at each one of those expenses every single day and said, okay, how can I remove or limit that overall expense? I want you to do that as well. And the only way you're able to do that is if you go about budgeting, and if you download the template that I have in the show notes, that will give you the budget template that you need in order to go about paying off debt and knowing exactly where your money is going so you can put it to work towards your specific goals. So go ahead and download that now. And then also make sure you guys are leaving a review and rating for the BetterWallet podcast. We put a lot of work and attention into the BetterWallet podcast in order to have more long-form content for you guys, because there's only so much information we can share over TikTok and Instagram. So the BetterWallet podcast has been able to help me to do that a little bit more. So with that, we're going to close out this episode. You guys have a great one, and I'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the BetterWallet podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you found any value, we'd appreciate a rating and review.